Life of the crew of a mega harvester in the hell of an agri-world. Warhammer 40,000. The first thing the machine takes from you is not your strength. It is not your sleep. It is not even your name. It is the little voice inside you that still believes someone will come if you scream. By the time the wheat starts drinking your blood, that voice is gone, and all that remains is the floor trembling under your bones. How does the Imperium find enough food to keep its vast body alive? Maybe you have thought about the ration in a soldier's barracks, the bowl in a lower hive canteen, the meal in the wardroom of a cruiser. Maybe you are chewing your own slab right now, washing it down with recaf, and never once thinking where it came from, what planet grew it, whose hands gathered the things that became your food. I will tell you whose hands. There are worlds in the Imperium that never make it into the tactical briefings. They do not burn. No legions of heretics march across them. No drop pods fall from orbit into their soil. They grow wheat, grain. From horizon to horizon, a golden wall harvested by machines the size of settlements, sometimes the size of cities. Kilometer-long combines on tracks, and inside them thousands of people live, give birth, work, and die. The machines almost never stop, except in the rarest emergencies. The people inside them do not stop either. Those people have no names in the records of the administratum. They have crew numbers. They have a column called productive loss. If they are lucky, there is a tin medal at the end of the season for the ones who lived long enough to receive it. For the ones who did not, there are the tracks of the harvester. Mud, oil, wheat, and the soil where another poor soul was ground into the earth for the good of the Imperium and its great purpose. I woke because one of my teeth split apart. The pain went through me from the crown of my head to the ends of my toes. It simply cracked. Lower left, third from the edge. I lay in the dark, touching the sharp broken place with my tongue, listening to the floor shudder beneath me. The floor always shudders. Every second, every hour, every year. When you live inside Gideon Prime, you forget what silence is. Silence will come only when the machine dies. But there is one small problem. If the machine dies, you will be dead soon after. I sat up on what passed for a bed. Dust hung in the air, yellow, fine, faintly sweet on the tongue. It gets in through the ventilation, through the cracks, through every rivet loosened by vibration. Golden grain dust. We breathe it, eat it, sleep in it. It packs beneath the nails, gathers in the corners of the eyes, settles in the folds of clothes. The old ones say that if you cut open the lung of a dead man from Gideon, you do not find flesh inside. You find pressed dough. Above me were 6 tiers of bunks like mine. Below me, 4 more. Habitation Bay 14. 180 people in a room the size of a shipping container. To my left, Bram was snoring, a huge man with a broken nose and a burn across his face. A burst steam pipe left that mark last season. He snored with a whistle because his left nostril was sealed with scar tissue. To my right there was an empty place. Yesterday Noah had slept there. Today Noah was already dead. I would learn that later. For now I only sat there, spitting blood from the broken tooth, waiting for the horn. The horn is the voice of Gideon. It comes from speakers as tall as a man, set into every corridor, every compartment, every corner of that moving city. A low belly sound that makes the ribs vibrate. The first horn means rise. The second means breakfast. The third means shift. Between the first and the third there are 40 minutes. In 40 minutes you must stand, reach the latrine block, wait in line, wash in brown water from a common tap, collect your ration, force it into your mouth, reach your post and begin work. 40 minutes, generous. Last season they gave us 30. I pulled on my boots. The soles were worn down to thread. I could feel every seam of the deck through them. Warm metal. It is always warm because beneath it are the engine rooms, the reactor, the transmission, 1,000 tons of working iron. Gideon Prime is not merely a combine, though that is what the administratum calls it in the registers. Macro Harvester, Class GF, Prime Series, registration number whatever the parchment says. A mega harvester, a reaping machine. But when you live inside it, you understand that it is a city. A moving city on tracks about a kilometer long, 120 meters wide, 60 meters high. Living blocks, mess halls, repair shops, chapels, infirmary, punishment cells. Even what we called a cemetery, though in truth it was only a disposal bay with an outer hatch. 3,200 souls at the last count, 2,000 of them workers. The rest were attendants, priests, overseers, tech priests, administratum scribes, and a handful of people who officially did not exist. Penal laborers, debtors, those chained to the machine for offenses I do not wish to list. Behind the main hull trailed the old residential tow modules, 4 metal boxes for families, old people, and those who could no longer carry the main work. Another 400 people. The census counted them separately. Gideon moves at 8 kilometers an hour day and night without stopping. That sounds slow, but for a kilometer-long tracked beast on a packed route, it is the limit. It eats wheat, grinds it, and spits out compressed bales behind itself, where cargo haulers following in its wake collect them. Ahead is endless field. Behind is naked, ruined earth. We call it wheat in the old way, though there is probably nothing left in those stalks of ancient Terran wheat. A gene-modified grain crop, adapted to local soil and accelerated ripening cycles. But to us, it is wheat. Golden, eternal, cursed wheat. The planet is Harrow Prime, an agri-world with a heavy food tithe, the kind from which the administratum squeezes nearly everything it can. The whole value of the planet to the Imperium is grain. Most of the surface is arable land. The rest is spaceports, processing nodes, elevator complexes, and a few administrative settlements. I saw a city once in my life when they brought me here. I remember a covered truck, dust in the cracks of the tarp, and someone's voice saying, "Unload." There were 27 of us from the same orphanage. Orphans, foundlings. The administratum had issued a work order, 27 units of juvenile labor force for replenishment of the crew of Macro Harvester Prime. I remember the order number because they read it to us 3 times. At dispatch, at transfer, and at handover. As if the number made us more real. The horn struck. I rose and Bram twitched beside me, opened his eyes and cursed in one long rasping word that he said every morning. Habit, ritual, his own private prayer. All around bodies stirred, sweating, coughing, groaning. Someone fell from a bunk. The second tier is not high, but in the half-dark there was a dull thud and a cry. No one paid attention. An ordinary morning. I went to the exit, squeezing between bunks. The corridor was already a human river. Gray overalls, shaved heads, dark circles under the eyes. We all look the same. Dust makes us the same. It paints the skin yellow, bites into wrinkles, turns hair to stiff toe. The young look like old men, the old like corpses. Breakfast, the slab we call it. A rectangular brick the size of a palm, the color of wet cardboard. It tastes like wet cardboard. According to the label on the wrapping, it is a grain-based nutritive substance enriched with proteins. What proteins? Best not to think about. On agri-worlds there is a joke. The Imperium feeds us our own harvest, only through the dead. We eat what does not go into the main shipment. Reject grain, processing waste, protein mass, suspicious starch, and everything the administratum considers enough for working hands. Scraps from a table we set ourselves. I chewed the slab while walking. It was dry, it crumbled, and the crumbs mixed with the dust in my mouth. I washed it down with a swallow from my flask. The water tasted of machine oil. It passes through Gideon's recycling system, and no matter how hard the filters try, the taste remains. You get used to it. In time, you get used to everything. The third horn shift. I am Senior Technician of Beta Deck 3. It sounds important, but in truth it means I am responsible for 20 people who service the lower levels of the harvester, the feed system, the thrashing drums, and the track assemblies. The dirtiest, hottest, most dangerous section. I am 42. I became senior technician at 36 when the previous one, Isaac, slipped in an oil puddle and fell into the gap between track sections. It ground him up in 4 seconds. I was standing 3 meters from the place it happened. Gideon did not stop for even a heartbeat. Going down into the lower levels is like descending into the guts of an animal. First, metal ladders narrow, with rails wrapped in rags so they do not burn your hands. Then service corridors where pipes hang so low you have to bend. Then a hatch, and you are on a maintenance platform above the tracks. Heat is the first thing that hits your face. 45–50 degrees. We do not know exactly. The gauges broke long ago, and the tech priests see no reason to repair thermometers for workers. The heat rises from below, from the friction of tracks against earth, from the transmission, from the reactor that hums somewhere in the heart of the machine like the heart of a sick giant. The air here is thick and oily. Every breath is like swallowing hot soup. Only the soup is made of dust, metal filings, and rancid technical oil. Noah was waiting for me below. He stood by the bulkhead holding the rail, and I knew at once that something was wrong. Pale face, quick eyes. What? I shouted. Down here you shout because the roar of the tracks eats everything. Track 18. Bearing has been screaming for half an hour. 18th track is on the outer edge of the left tread. Getting there takes 15 minutes along service scaffolds beside working mechanisms. Each track plate is 4 meters wide and as thick as my arm. They crawl over rollers in a continuous belt, throwing up clouds of mud and ground straw. Between the tracks and the hull there is a gap of about 30 centimeters. That is where we crawl. We means me and Noah. Noah was young, about 20, thin, long, hands like sticks. He came to Gideon a year earlier from a penal transport. What he had done, I never asked. On Gideon you do not ask. Everyone here was either born aboard or brought here. If they brought you, you have nowhere else to go. We reached the 18th track. I heard the shriek long before we got there. Thin, piercing, like the cry of a crushed rat, only endless. The bearing. Without grease it would last another hour, 2 at most, then seize. A seized bearing means a stopped track. A stopped track means a wrench through the whole tread. A wrench means a crack in the drive shaft. A crack in the drive shaft means 3 days of repairs, and 3 days idle means failed quotas. On an agri-world, failed quotas are feared more than orcs. I pointed Noah at the gap. You go in, I feed the oil, 2 cups into the bearing, then back out. He looked at the gap, 30 centimeters of steel and darkness. Below, the roaring, grinding track belt moving at walking speed but pressing with the force of hundreds of tons. Above, the hull crusted with hot dust and oil. Between them you. Go on, I said calmly. You are thin, easier for you. He crawled in. I saw him squeeze into the slit, saw his boots slide in the oil, saw him search for purchase. Gloved fingers, and our gloves are rough cloth, not leather. Leather costs too much. He hooked himself along the ribs of the hull. He moved slowly, carefully, and I passed him the long oil can through the gap. I had done it hundreds of times. Before me others had done it hundreds of times. Work, ordinary work. Noah reached the bearing. I saw him turn onto his side to reach it. The shriek softened. The first cup went into the housing, then the second. Then Gideon lurched. Not much, uneven ground. A stone under the track, maybe a hollow. To the machine it was nothing. A slight tremor that the upper decks would not even notice, but down in the gap it was an earthquake. The hull jerked down by a few centimeters. Noah cried out. The oil can flew from his hand and clattered down onto the moving belt. At first I thought he would crawl out, that he had merely been frightened, had lost the can and would crawl out. But he did not come. Noah, I shouted. He did not answer. I crouched and peered into the gap. His overall had caught on a burr in the hull, a torn lip of weld. He tried to pull free, jerked his shoulder, but the cloth held and the track belt below kept moving. Slowly, mercilessly. It was taking away the support beneath him. The greasy rod under his feet was traveling with the track. "Knife," he shouted. "My knife is in my pocket." There was no knife in his pocket. Metal objects are forbidden on the lower decks except for assigned tools. I knew that, and he knew that. He had simply forgotten. I crawled toward him. 20 seconds to force myself into the gap, another 10 to reach him. I grabbed for his overall, trying to tear the cloth with my hands. It would not tear. Rough Imperial fabric, double-stitched, made for wear. I pulled, yanked, scratched with my nails. 15 seconds. The rod under his feet disappeared. Noah hung from the caught overall, and his legs dropped onto the belt. I saw his eyes, wide and wet. He was not screaming. He only looked at me. In that look there was everything: pleading, fear, and something else I could not name for a long time. Now I know. Relief. Relief that someone was there, that he was not alone. The belt dragged him by the legs. The cloth finally tore, but not where I was pulling. Lower, near the waist. It took him down between the tracks. I managed to seize his hand. His skin was slick with oil. His fingers slipped. 4 seconds. I know because I counted. Gideon did not stop. I crawled out of the gap and sat on the platform. My hands shook. There was a dark stain on the right glove. I thought it was oil, then understood it was not. I sat like that for about 10 minutes. Then I stood and went to report to the deck master. Deck Master Silas, whom we still called the bosun in the old way, was a man of about 60, with a face like chewed hide. He listened, nodded, and wrote in the log: "Worker Noah, crew number 2247D, productive loss. Cause: failure to observe safety procedure." Failure to observe safety procedure. Noah crawled into the gap because I told him to. I am senior technician. I answer for 20 people. I sent him into that gap. Silas looked at me. "Replacement comes in 3 days. They will transfer one from Eastern Gideon. Until then, manage." 3 days with 1 man fewer, and just as many bearings to shriek. I returned to the platform. Track 18 no longer screamed. Noah had managed to grease it. The work was done. That evening on the bunks I thought about Noah, not about the way he died. I had seen enough of that to grow used to it. I thought about the fact that I did not know his family name. He had worked beside me for a year, and I had never bothered to ask. On Gideon, family names mean little. There is a first name and a crew number. The rest gets erased quickly by dust. We are labor mass, biomass, consumable material. Noah, crew number 2247D, greased the bearing and lay down between the tracks. A fine epitaph. The next morning there was already someone else's bundle on his bunk. Someone from the neighboring bay had taken the place. That fast, faster than I expected. Noah had left almost nothing. Only a spare pair of foot wraps and a homemade bone comb he had carved in his first week aboard. I took the comb. Why, I do not know. Perhaps so that something of him would remain. There are no funerals on Gideon. The disposal hatch, the same bay we called the cemetery, is where bodies are dropped outside onto the processed earth behind the machine. The body becomes fertilizer, good organic matter. A tech priest named Mordain once told me, the most efficient form of recycling is the one in which nothing is lost. He was speaking of spare parts, but the phrase suits everything on Gideon. Only Noah was not thrown through the hatch. His body remained in the tracks, ground up, mixed with mud, straw, and oil. An hour after his death, maybe 2, his remains soaked into the soil under the treads and fresh wheat fell over it. Next season, maybe this same one, someone on a hive world will eat bread whose flour contains atoms of Noah. Pure recycling, nothing is lost. That evening the bay was quiet. Bram sat on his bunk mending a boot, wrapping the sole with wire because the sole was peeling away. Mara read a prayer sheet, worn thin, rubbed almost through, the words barely visible. Her lips moved. I did not know whether she was truly praying or merely repeating words from habit. On Gideon it is hard to tell faith from habit. The priest holds service every evening in the cramped chapel on the middle tier. Half the crew goes, half does not. Those who go do it for different reasons. Some believe. Some are afraid. Some are simply glad to sit for half an hour without working. I went before. I stopped 3 years ago. The priest had been preaching about the great harvest, about how the emperor gathers the souls of the faithful as a reaper gathers grain. A beautiful metaphor, perhaps, for those who have never seen a harvest work, for those who have never heard a bearing scream a second before a man is pulled into the tracks. To me it sounded like mockery. I lay down and closed my eyes. In the darkness I saw Noah's face again, wet eyes, open mouth, the hand slipping out of mine. The floor kept trembling. Gideon moved on. The mess hall on Gideon is a long room with a low ceiling, heating and ventilation pipes along the walls, tables of steel sheet welded to legs, benches the same. 600 people are fed here at once in 3 shifts. Clatter of bowls, voices, coughing, always coughing. Dust does its work. Every second person on Gideon has a chronic lung sickness. The medic calls it wheat chest. The cure is a syrup made from some fungus grown in the technical hold. It helps poorly, but there is nothing else. Lunch that day was porridge, gray and lumpy, made from ground grain that had failed sorting. Hard little stalks floated in it like wire. We spit them onto the table. Beside every bowl, a little pile. A ritual. Some people arrange patterns with them out of boredom. I ate without raising my eyes. Bram sat beside me. Across from him sat Mara, a woman from our crew, broad, silent, with hands covered in calluses and burns. She worked the thrashing drums, feeding stalks when the automatics jammed. She had 3 fingers left on her left hand. The little finger and ring finger had gone into a drum 2 seasons before. "Heard the news," Mara said. Bram looked up. "What news?" "A clerk came down from orbit, administratum. He is talking to the priest." An administratum clerk is bad news. A clerk does not fly down to praise you. A clerk flies down to demand. A priest comes with him so that the demand looks like the will of the emperor. They entered the mess hall. 2 people unlike us, as if from another species. The clerk, thin, tall, in a clean gray uniform, skin as white as only people who live on orbital stations can be, people who never breathe dust. An augmetic monocle sat on his face. A servo skull hovered over his shoulder, humming softly. The priest was fat in a black robe, a golden aquila at his throat, a bundle of prayer scrolls at his belt. His face was red, oily, well-fed. They stood at the main table. The clerk unrolled a parchment. The servo skull projected a beam of light onto the wall, and numbers appeared there. "Workers of Gideon Prime," the clerk began. His voice was thin and nasal, used to the silence of offices. "By decree of the Adeptus Administratum, in fulfillment of the emergency requisition order of the Departamento Munitorum, the tithe quota for the agri-worlds of the Harrow system is raised by 0.1%. He said it as if reading a shopping list. 0.1, a number that means nothing on paper and death on the ground. I heard Bram beside me exhale. 1% is tens of thousands of tons of grain above standard. For Gideon it means faster. The machine must go faster. The blades must spin faster. The threshers must grind more. Mechanisms already working at their limit must be driven harder. And the people. The clerk continued. He listed order numbers, subsections, dates, seals. No one in the mess hall cared. We were listening for one thing only. How much more? The movement speed of the macro harvester is increased to 10 kilometers an hour, the clerk said. Crew rations are revised according to wartime standards. Reduction of 15% from the current ration. The mess hall, noisy a moment before, fell silent. 600 people, and no sound but the thunder of the machine behind the walls. The priest stepped forward. He raised his hand with the aquila. Brothers and sisters in service. His voice was deep, rich, the voice of a man who had never eaten gray porridge with straw in it. My dear ones, the weight placed upon your shoulders is not a burden, but a gift. Your sweat feeds the armies of the Emperor. Your hands hold the front. Your sacrifice is a weapon against the dark. Every grain you gather beyond the former measure may become the ration of a guardsman defending your brothers at the far end of the galaxy. So rejoice. Rejoice, for the Emperor sees your labor. He smiled broadly, warmly. His cheeks shone. Myra beside me lowered her eyes into her bowl. The porridge was cold. She poked the lump with her spoon, once, again, then set the spoon down. I said nothing. Speaking discontent aloud is dangerous. Not only because someone might report you, though informers exist on every Gideon, but because words change nothing. The clerk would sit in his shuttle and fly back to orbit, where the air was clean and rations full. The priest might fly with him, or he might stay. We would remain here with the same number of hands, less food, and a machine now ordered to run faster. 0.1%. Somewhere in a fleet headquarters, in a clean office with a window onto the stars, someone moved a marker on a screen by 1 notch. Up there it was a number. Down here it was Noah being ground between the tracks. It was Mara working hungrier than before. It was children in the rear tow modules already walking with bellies swollen from malnutrition. After lunch I ran into Mordain, the tech priest of Gideon, near the hatch to the engine room. He stood over a bundle of cables, and his mechadendrites, 4 metal tentacles growing from his back, sorted them with clicking precision. His face was half human, half metal. His one remaining eye, clouded gray, looked at the world with eternal fatigue. 10 kilometers, he said to me without greeting, without preface. The engine will not bear it, not in this condition. And if it does, I asked. Then the cooling system will not. 3 weeks at most. What then? Overheat, then a choice. Repair while moving or stop. Stopping means death for the quota. Repair while moving means death for people. 3 weeks, I repeated. Perhaps 4, Mordain said, if the machine god is merciful. He turned back to his cables. The conversation was over. I walked on down the corridor. The walls trembled. Gideon was accelerating. I could feel it in my feet. The vibration had become quicker, meaner. The machine strained, squeezing out the extra 2 kilometers an hour that someone in a clean office in orbit needed so the number in a report would match the plan. I thought of the priest and his rich voice. Rejoice, he had said. Your sweat feeds the armies of the Emperor. You know what? Maybe it does. Maybe somewhere at the far end of the segmentum, a guardsman opens a ration made from our grain and chews it in a trench, and it helps him a little. Maybe I want to believe that. I need to believe that. Because if it is not true, if our grain rots in a munitorum storehouse, or feeds someone's livestock, or goes onto the table of a planetary governor who has never heard of Gideon Prime, then what is all this for? Why is Noah lying between the tracks? That evening there was a fight in the mess hall. Small, stupid. 2 men from the night shift argued over a place at the table, but they hit each other with silent, bitter desperation, as if they were not fighting for a bench but for the right to something larger. An overseer split them up with a shock baton. Standard procedure. Both fell and convulsed. The overseer, a young man with a baton that looked like a toy in his hand, wrote their numbers into a report. I passed by and saw one of them lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling. Split lips, blood from the nose. He was smiling. I had seen that smile before on others in other places. The smile of a man with nothing left to lose. A man who has realized it cannot get worse. It simply cannot get worse. They cut the rations the next day. The slab became smaller, a finger's width thinner. The difference seemed tiny, but when you are already hungry, every gram is the distance between I can work and my hands are shaking. They cut the water too, unofficially. The pressure in the taps simply grew weaker. Mordain diverted part of the water to cool the engine, which now ran at higher revolutions. On the 8th day after the clerk's visit, the blades clogged. Gideon's forward threshers are a row of spinning discs, each 5 meters across, fixed to a horizontal axle. They cut the stalks and feed them onto the conveyor. The stalks on Harrow Prime are their own story. The grain here is nothing like the golden heads bowed under a warm breeze in propaganda prints. This is modified grain, reinforced grain made for the soil. Stalks 3 meters high, as thick as a thumb, hard as steel wire. Heads heavy, dense, packed with starch and protein. One stalk weighs almost as much as a walking stick. A field of them is a wall, a golden wall from horizon to horizon. And those stalks wrapped around the thresher axles. It happens when the machine goes too fast and the discs cannot chew through them quickly enough. The stalks twist, compress, form cables that seize the rotation. The threshers stop. Gideon goes blind. The forward module stops eating the field. The only way is manual cleaning from outside. I volunteered, not from heroism, calculation. I knew how to do it. I had done it before. If I sent someone from the crew, he might botch it, cut himself on a blade, fall under the wheels. Another loss, an unaffordable luxury in hard times. The outer exit is through a side hatch on the 3rd tier. The respirator technician helped me strap on a safety belt and clip my carabiner to a cable running along the hull. The hatch opened, and I saw the sky. You must understand, Gideon has almost no windows. The few viewing lenses and clouded ports in technical sections do not count. Through them, you see only smears of light and shadow. There are grainy screens showing images from outer cameras. There are hatches, but they are always closed. Inside the machine, you live in a world of metal, dust, and artificial light. You forget that anything exists outside. Then the hatch opens, and everything falls on you at once. Sky. Vast, endless, faded like an old rag. On Harrow Prime, the weather has long been made obedient to the harvest. They say rain comes here not by the will of the sky, but according to the schedule of orbital stations. Clouds are rare. The sun, pale and distant, hung low, and its light painted the world in dull gold. And the field. 3-meter wheat stretched in every direction to the horizon. Dense, even, identical, like a yellow ocean frozen halfway through a breath. The stalks stood so close together that a hand could not pass between them. Wind moved the heads, and they swayed together like a single living thing. Nausea took me. I had not expected it. I thought I would step out, clean the blade, climb back in. But when I saw that field, that endlessness, it bent me double. My legs went soft. My hands clenched the rail. My breathing broke. Agoraphobia. That is what the medical manuals in our infirmary call it. Fear of open spaces. Every 3rd person on Gideon has it. We live in tightness, in cages of steel and pipes. The brain gets used to that. It begins to believe the world is small, that walls are the natural state. Then you step outside and the brain screams danger. You are exposed. You are open. You can be seen. You will be eaten. Vastness is a predator and you are prey. I stood by the hatch for a minute, maybe 2, breathing, counting breaths. An old trick Isaac taught me, the one who later fell between the tracks. Count breaths, he used to say. If you are counting, you are thinking. If you are thinking, you are alive. And if you are alive, work. I stepped onto the hull. Gideon was moving, and I moved with it. The hull, hot and rusty, sloped down toward the threshers. I crawled along the staples, holding the cable. Wind struck my face, filled my mouth with dust. Below, 3 meters to the blades. Around me, field. The stalks were so close to the machine that I could reach out and touch them. Hard, dry, warm from the sun. Tiny insects crawled on them, local beetles, brown, armored in chitin, billions of them on Harrow Prime. They live in the wheat, eat the wheat, and go into processing with it. Extra protein. I reached the thresher. A cable of compressed stalks had wrapped around the axle in 3 layers as thick as my thigh, tight as rope. I pulled out the cutter, a crude hand tool with a toothed blade of coarse steel, and began sawing. The work took 2 hours. 2 hours I hung on the side of Gideon, sawing stalks, choking on dust, trying not to look at the horizon because the horizon was empty. Empty and all the same. Golden field under pale sky. Nothing else. No tree, no hill, no building. On agri-worlds there is no room for anything but yield. Every square meter is tons of grain to be gathered and shipped from the planet. Every square meter occupied by anything else is a hole in the quota. They say Harrow Prime once had mountains and rivers. Then it was remade for harvest. Dams, blasts, boring engines, and the kind of patience only the Imperium can afford. Centuries of terraforming. Rivers into underground irrigation channels, mountains into flat plains, forests into ash. There was some kind of life here once. Grain replaced it. I sawed through stalks and thought, we live inside a machine that drives across a field with no end. We reap that field all our lives and it never ends. Behind us it grows again. Local cycles allow 3 harvests a year. We will never reach the edge. We will never see anything but the golden wall. The last cable dropped away. I returned to the hatch and climbed inside. The technician shut the cover behind me, and the familiar tightness of Gideon wrapped around me like an old blanket. Heat, thunder, dust, darkness, and a strange, shameful feeling of relief. My world is a cage, and I am calmer inside it. On the way back I ran into Elliot, the freckled boy who would later crawl into Kappa 7. Then he was still new, 3 months aboard, with eyes in which something alive remained. He stood by an old viewing lens, round, cloudy, smeared with oil. Through it you could see only a dull golden blur. The field. "You were outside," he said. "I was." "What is it like?" I thought about how to describe endlessness to someone who has never seen it. How to explain fear of emptiness to someone who knows only walls. "Big," I said, "very big." "Beautiful." I looked at him. Beautiful. That word is rarely used on Gideon. A beautiful rivet, a beautiful bearing. Beautiful the way Noah went into the tracks. "No," I said, frightening. He nodded as if he understood, but he could not understand until he saw it himself. And when he saw it, if he saw it, he would understand what I had understood. Our fear of the endless field is not a phobia. It is instinct. The field is not for us. We are for the field, its servants, its tools, its fuel. The field exists to feed the Imperium. We exist to feed the field. And if we leave the machine, the field will swallow us. Because the field is the only immortal thing on this planet. We die. Gideon's rust. The Imperium fights and bleeds. The wheat grows. 3 harvests a year, horizon to horizon. Forever. 3 weeks. Mordain said 3 weeks. He was wrong by 4 days. On the 17th day of accelerated running, the reactor cooling system failed for the first time. I learned it when a coolant pipe burst in a lower corridor. Green liquid, toxic, caustic smelling of burned rubber poured onto the deck. 2 of my crew scalded their legs. One, Lucas, a boy of about 25, screamed so loudly I heard him 3 compartments away. The skin on his shins came off like a stocking. When the medic arrived, she shook her head and ordered him carried to the infirmary. "3rd-degree burns," she said. "He will not work. 2 months." 2 months, another one gone. Mordain appeared an hour later. He examined the burst pipe, ran a mechadendrite along the tier, and turned to me. "Coolant is boiling, reactor overheating, reserve circuits at 60%. What do you need?" "Manual replacement of heat exchangers in Section Kappa 7, inside the reactor casing." Section Kappa 7 is a place even tech priests enter reluctantly. It sits close to the reactor core, temperature over 100 degrees. There are 4 protective suits on Gideon, and 2 of them have holes. Maximum time in the zone is 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, even strong men break. After 20, people are more often carried out than led. "How many people?" I asked. 6, 3 pairs, 15 minutes each. Remove old exchangers, set new ones, fasten them. If they work quickly, we finish. If they work quickly, I repeated. He looked at me with his single gray eye. I would send servitors, he said. All functional servitors are already harnessed to processing and drive assemblies. Freeing them would cost more than we lose here. I know what that means, I cut in. That evening I gathered the crew, 18 people after the losses. I stood before them in the cramped tool storeroom and thought about how to say what I had to say. We need volunteers, I began, 6 people. Work in Kappa, heat exchanger replacement, hot, dangerous. They knew what Kappa meant, everyone knew. Volunteers, I repeated. Bram stood in the corner, arms crossed. Mara stared at the floor. The others looked anywhere but at me. No one raised a hand. I do not blame them. I would not have raised mine either. Good, I said, then by list. I took out the crew log, 18 names, beside each age, service, medical notes. I looked at the list and thought, the older ones cannot go, they have experience impossible to replace. The middling ones are risky, they carry the main work. That leaves the young, the ones who came recently, who have not yet learned anything irreplaceable. Consumable material. I named 6. 3 of them were younger than 25. I watched them step out, pale, lips tight, wearing that special expression people have when they receive an order that cannot be challenged. One of them, Elliot, 19 years old, round-faced, freckled, looked at me and asked, "And you?" "I will be on comms by the hatch, coordinating." He nodded and said nothing, but I saw that he understood. I was sending him where I was not going myself. Morning shift. The first pair entered Kappa 7 in protective suits patched with rough cloth at the knees and elbows. I stood by the hatch and listened to their breathing over Vox, heavy, rasping, with pauses. 12 minutes, the first pair came out, both red as boiled shellfish. One collapsed onto the deck and vomited, the other stood swaying, knees folding. Second pair, 15 minutes. They came out in slightly better shape, but one of them, Calvin, a solid man with a square jaw, held his arm away from his body. The skin of his palm had blistered. He had grabbed a hot pipe. Third pair, Elliot and another boy, Nathan, thin, quiet. They went in. 10 minutes, Vox silent. 12 minutes. Elliot report. Silence, then a wheeze. Last exchanger will not move. Fastening jammed. Come out, time is running. 1 more minute, I almost have it. Come out. Now. 15 minutes. Elliot. 17 minutes. They came out. Nathan was unconscious. Elliot dragged him, staggering. The protective suit on Elliot was smoking, truly smoking. Steam rose from the fabric. His face under the helmet glass was crimson, eyes squeezed shut. He dropped Nathan by the hatch and sat on the floor. Done, he said. The exchanger is seated. Nathan died 3 hours later in the infirmary. Heat stroke, internal burns. The medic said his kidneys failed. Elliot survived. 2 days later he returned to shift. Burns on his hands and neck wrapped in bandages. Eyes empty as windows in an abandoned house. He did not speak to me, and I understood. The heat exchangers worked. The reactor cooled. Gideon kept moving at 10 kilometers an hour. Nathan, crew number 3018D, cause of death, thermal trauma during repair work. Another line in the deckmaster's log. And I had stood by the hatch and coordinated. I did not go into Kappa myself. I am senior technician, too valuable. I cannot risk myself. That is what Mordain told me when I asked whether I could go instead of one of the young. You are senior, you know the machine. If you die, the deck stops. If one of them dies, replacement arrives tomorrow. Logic, cold, exact, flawless logic. The logic of Gideon, the logic of the Imperium, the logic that keeps me awake at night. 3 days after the repair, I went to the infirmary. The infirmary on Gideon is a room with 6 cots, a shelf of medicines, and one medic named Agnes. A thin old woman bent with shaking hands. But those hands had stitched wounds, set bones, and pulled metal splinters from human flesh for 50 years. Agnes had been on Gideon longer than anyone. She remembered the previous prefect, and the one before him, and the one before that. Nathan lay on the far cot, already dead. Agnes had covered him with a sheet, gray, washed thin, stained yellow with grain dust. His feet stuck out from underneath, red as if boiled. "Kidneys," Agnes said without turning. She stood by the shelf, sorting vials. "Did he suffer at the end?" "No." "Before that?" "Yes." I stood and looked at the shape under the sheet. Young man, 23, second season on Gideon. He had a habit of whistling quietly under his breath, always the same tune, one he must have brought from some other life. I never knew what it was. I never asked. "Agnes," I said, "how many this season?" She turned and looked at me. Her eyes were cloudy, with yellowed whites but sharp. "You are counting." "I am." 11, she said, including Nathan. 4 tracks, 2 threshers, 1 steam pipe, 1 fell from scaffold, 2 sickness, and Nathan. 11. The season had only just passed the middle. Last season we lost 9 in the whole cycle. The record was 2 seasons ago. 17. "We may beat it," I said. "We will," said Agnes, and returned to the vials. I met Elliot in the corridor as I left the infirmary. He stood by the wall, shoulder against a pipe, staring at the floor. The bandages on his hands were dirty, soaked with something yellow, pus or oil. "How are the hands?" I asked. He did not lift his head. "Working." Agnes looked at them. Looked and said, "They will heal." I wanted to say something else, something human, "Thank you, forgive me, well done," any of those words, none fit. Thank you for what? For living while another died. Forgive me for what? For sending him there. He knew, I knew, everyone knew. To say it would mean pretending there had been a choice. "All right," I said, "shift tomorrow." "Shift tomorrow." I walked on. His voice struck my back, quiet, hoarse. He was screaming in there, Nathan. When we were taking off the exchanger, he kept screaming that he was hot. Then he stopped. I thought he had grown used to it. He had only passed out. I stopped. I could not turn around. Shame would not let me. "I know," I said. Then I walked on, because I could not continue the conversation. Feeling is a luxury on Gideon, and of course I cannot afford it. The quota was burning. We knew it before Silas announced it officially. We knew by the signs. The overseers grew crueler, the rations thinner, and instead of ordinary ministorum prayers, the speakers began pouring out motivational hymns. Bright, piercing songs with drums and chorus that made you want to stuff rags into the speakers. Speed 10 kilometers an hour, but the blades were not keeping up. The grain on that stretch was especially dense. Old planting, powerful root system, stalks thicker than usual. The threshers jammed every few hours. We cleared them, started again, and a few hours later they jammed again. Conveyors clogged. Sorting chambers overflowed. Gideon ate the field but digested it slower than required. And time passed. To the spaceport drop point, where grain is loaded onto orbital shuttles, 600 kilometers remained. By schedule, we should have arrived on time. In truth, we were 5 days behind. 5 days, it sounds small. For Gideon, catastrophe. Orbital transports wait in low orbit, and every day of waiting costs money, resources, fuel. If we are late, the transports leave. The grain remains on the planet. The tithe is unpaid. The governor receives a reprimand. The administratum begins an inquiry. Someone is punished. Someone means us. The meeting was called by the commander of Gideon, Prefect Everett Vale. I had seen him perhaps 3 times all season. He lives on the upper decks in the officer block, where the air is cleaner, the walls thicker and the food real, not starch paste. Vale is a man of about 50, with a neat beard and cold eyes. A former administratum official assigned to Gideon for some offense at a previous post. He commanded the machine like a ledger, like an office, by numbers, schedules, reports. He did not see people. He saw units of labor force. At the meeting were Vale, Mordain, Deckmaster Silas, the senior technicians of all decks, 4 of us, and the priest. The priest, as it happened, had stayed aboard. He had not flown away with the clerk. Why, I did not know. Punishment, perhaps. Observer, perhaps. Vale stood by the map on the large screen where the route line glowed. Red dot, Gideon. Green dot, spaceport. Between them, 600 kilometers of golden field. We are behind, Vale said. Output is 10% below standard. At current speed, we arrive 6 days late. The transports leave. He looked across us. Decision: reduce harvester mass. Rear habitation modules 1 through 4 will be detached. I did not understand at once. The rear habitation modules. The same tow modules that had trailed behind Gideon's stern since the start of the season. 4 metal boxes, each the size of a small house, on coupling cables and shared power lines. Inside lived those who did not work the main mechanisms. Workers' families, old people, sick, disabled. About 400 people. Detach, Vale repeated. Without modules, harvester mass falls by 800 tons. Speed can rise to 11 or 12 kilometers an hour without additional reactor load. Mordain nodded. He already knew. They had surely discussed it beforehand. And the people, someone asked. Owen, senior technician of the nose deck. Vale looked at him. The modules will be left in place with water reserves for 10 days. After grain delivery, a tractor will be sent for them. In the report, they would probably call it temporary stationing of non-working and dependent modules until completion of the transport phase of harvest. Fine words for a simple act. Leave 400 people in the field. 10 days. A tractor, at least a week out, plus loading and return time. 3 weeks total. 400 people in metal boxes in the middle of a field with water for 10 days. Water for 10 days, Owen repeated. The modules have condensate collectors, said Vale. They will manage. Condensate collectors. I knew what state they were in. Number 2 had not worked since last season. Number 3 leaked. Manage. Perhaps, if luck held, if the heat did not strike, if one of the old ones did not fall ill worse than usual. And if not? The priest coughed and raised his hand, as if beginning a sermon. A trial from the Emperor, he said. Grievous, yet just. Those in the modules will serve the Imperium through their endurance as those aboard serve through their labor. We are all reapers in one field. I said nothing. Owen said nothing. Silas said nothing. We all said nothing because there was nothing to say. The decision was made. The prefect had ordered. The priest had blessed. The tech priest had confirmed that it was technically possible. Detachment was set for night. Night on Harrow Prime is a conditional thing. The sun goes down, but darkness never fully comes. A pale band always remains on the horizon, and stars are dim through the field haze. Inside Gideon there is no difference. Lamps burn the same. The machine thunders the same. Night is only the time when the day shift sleeps. They called me to the couplings at 2300. Silas, Owen, and 4 others. Tools, heavy sledgehammers, bolt cutters, hydraulic wrenches. Coupling cables of steel as thick as an arm, 4 per module. 16 cables, plus power lines, water hoses, ventilation pipes. We worked by hand lamps. The cables did not want to yield. Rust, strain, the weight of the modules. Every blow of the sledgehammer rang through hands and shoulders. Bram cut a power line with the bolt cutter. Sparks fell and something hissed. Through the bulkhead of Module 1 someone knocked. Dull fist blows on metal. Then voices, muffled, indistinct. Then a scream, high, piercing. Bram stopped cutting and looked at me. They know. They were told. And what? What? What will they do? Come out and run. He took up the bolt cutter again. I lifted the sledgehammer. The knocking did not stop. When we cut the last cable of the first module, the module jerked and began to fall behind. Slowly, Gideon moved forward and the module, robbed of pull, stopped. I saw it drift into the dark, a black rectangle against the pale line of the horizon. Light blinked through cracks in its plating. Someone stood at a slit and looked at us. I did not see a face, only a silhouette. Then the second, the third, the fourth. With each module it became easier. Hands got used to it. Cables yielded faster. By the fourth, we worked in silence and in rhythm like a machine. The fourth module detached almost without sound. Only the snap of the last shackle and the soft scrape of metal on metal as the box fell away from the hull. No one knocked from inside. Maybe they were asleep. Maybe they had already accepted it. Maybe they had not yet understood. I stood at the stern hatch and watched the fourth module drift into the dark. The fourth, the smallest. Mostly old people lived there, those who had worked on Gideon for 50 years and could no longer stand at a station. On Hive World, such people are written off to spent districts. On Gideon, they are put in a tow module and fed while still useful, at least as stitchers of clothes or cleaners of filters. When they stop being useful, no one touches them. They are simply forgotten, like a broken tool in the back of a drawer. 4 modules, 400 people, 4 dark rectangles falling back into the endless field. We finished by 3. I returned to my sleeping place. Lay down, the floor trembled. Gideon was already gaining speed, free of hundreds of tons of ballast. I lay and listened to the silence. Relative silence. Gideon always roars, but if you listen, you can tell what is missing. Other voices. You could hear them through the bulkheads before, faint, distant, but there. Laughter, crying, scuffling, now nothing. 400 people. Bram turned toward me from the next bunk. Will they go back for them? He asked quietly. Vale said they would. Do you believe it? I did not answer. Bram fell silent too. He knew my answer. The floor trembled. Gideon moved forward. 11 kilometers an hour, toward the spaceport, toward the quota, toward a tin medal and a line in a report saying Macro Harvester Prime fulfilled the plan, while behind us in the dark, in the endless golden field, stood 4 metal boxes, and inside them people with water for 10 days. I closed my eyes. The tooth that had cracked on the first day ached. I touched it with my tongue, felt the break, and the pain was sharp, familiar, understandable. My pain was the only thing that belonged to me. We arrived. The spaceport of Harrow Prime was not a city, but a belt of concrete, elevators, conveyor galleries, and landing cups. Forget everything you have heard about Hive World spaceports with kilometer spires, blazing searchlights, and crowds. Here there was flatness. Dozens of landing pads, each a circle half a kilometer across, burned by shuttle exhaust into black glass. Receiving towers stretched to the horizon, and beyond them ran rows of storage silos, a metal forest, a second harvest, low gray hangars with faded aquilas on the walls. The control tower was the only high building, like a finger stuck into the ground. And the elevators. Giant elevators, hundreds of them, standing in rows like sentries. Metal cylinders as tall as 5-story houses, into which grain is poured before loading onto orbital barges. Conveyor galleries ran between them like arteries, and somewhere beyond the hangars receiving stations hummed, able to swallow hundreds of thousands of tons of grain per cycle. Gideon stopped 300 meters from the nearest elevator. I did not know by the horn. There was no horn. I knew by the silence. The floor stopped trembling. For the first time in, I do not remember how many months, silence. It struck the ears harder than noise. Silence on Gideon is like blindness for someone who has seen all his life. You do not know what to do with yourself. You lie on the bunk and listen, and there is nothing to listen to. Metal does not groan, pipes do not hum, tracks do not grind. Only your breathing and someone's distant cough. Unloading began at dawn. The rear gates of Gideon opened. Steel leaves, each the size of a living bay, slid aside and grain poured from the belly of the machine. Hundreds of thousands of tons. A golden avalanche running on conveyors into the open mouths of elevators. We stood on the deck and watched. Workers are not allowed outside during unloading, but Silas waved his hand, "Go if you want." We went. The air outside was different. Warm, yes. Dusty, yes. But there was a note in it the machine did not have. Earth, just earth. The smell of soil, dry grass, something alive. I stood on concrete, burned landing pad under my boots, and in the distance the wall of wheat, golden, endless. From here it did not seem frightening. From here it seemed like background scenery. The shuttles began to descend. First came heavy cargo lifters, wide-bellied orbital shuttles built not for people but for mass. Fat, roaring bellies open like fish mouths. Then real orbital barges, each needing its own pad. They landed one after another, opened holds, and workers, not ours but port workers in comparatively clean orange robes, filter masks hanging at their necks, shift brands on their collars, faces with a fed color almost offensive to us, loaded grain into containers. I watched them work, watched them talk, laugh, gesture, watched one drink water from a clean bottle, transparent with a label. Clean water. Beautiful, is it not? Bram said beside me. He too stood staring at the shuttles. All of it goes up there. He waved toward the sky, to hive worlds, to Munitorum stores, to rations. The ones up there will eat our wheat and never think about it. Why would they? No reason at all. He spat. Just strange. We are here, they are there, and the wheat is like a bridge. Only we stand at one end and they stand at the other, and we will never see each other. The ceremony was at noon. Prefect Vale stood on a platform made from crates. Beside him, the priest, an administratum clerk, not the one who had flown in earlier, but the same kind of pale man in a clean uniform with a monocle, and an officer of the Planetary Defense Force for protocol. The speech was short. Vale read the numbers. Gideon Prime, for the current season, had gathered and delivered so many hundreds of thousands of tons of grain. Quota fulfilled at 100.2%. 100.2. We had overfulfilled the plan by 0.2%. 0.2. I calculated in my head. Those were the thousands of tons we had squeezed from the machine when we detached the modules. Tons that cost 400 people. Simple mathematics. Modules off, speed up, more grain. Plan exceeded, everyone pleased. The number in the report beautiful, round, with a plus sign in spirit if not on the parchment. Vale would probably receive commendation, perhaps promotion, perhaps transfer away from Gideon to something more respectable. An office, an orbital station, a warm place where the floor does not shake and the air does not smell of oil. By administratum standards, he deserved it. He made a hard decision, and the decision paid. Numbers do not lie, numbers never lie, people who count them lie. The priest read a prayer. The clerk pressed a seal onto the parchment. The officer saluted. Then medals. Tin circles on cloth ribbons. An aquila on one side, an inscription on the other. For shock labor in glory of the emperor and the tithe. They formed us in a row, the whole crew, everyone who remained. Vale walked down the line and placed a medal around each neck. When he reached me, he looked into my eyes for a second, no longer, and hung the medal on me. The tin was warm from the sun. I stood holding it in my hand. Aquila on one side, words on the other. Light as a wrapper. I thought of Noah, of Nathan, of Lucas with burned legs, of Elliot who would not speak and would not look at me, of the people in 4 metal boxes in the middle of the field, of the tooth that had cracked on the first morning, of Isaac who had taught me to count breaths and then fallen between the tracks. I thought of the quota, 100.2%. Someone in a clean office in orbit would see that number and mark a check. Grain would go to a hive world, into munitorum reserves, into rations. Billions of people would eat bread. Guardsmen would receive meals. The machine of the Imperium would turn one more revolution. And we would return, climb back into Gideon. The floor would tremble, the horn would strike. A new season would begin. A new field, new bearings, new names on the list, which would become crew numbers, and then lines in the deck master's log. Do you know what I understood, standing on that pier with a tin medal in my hand? We are not reapers, we are the harvest. Gideon reaps the wheat and the Imperium reaps us. Grinds us, sorts us, presses us into briquettes, sends us where needed. Noah is a briquette. Nathan is a briquette. 400 people in the field are briquettes. I am a briquette that has not yet been pressed hard enough. The priest said rejoice. The clerk said 0.1%. Vale said quota fulfilled. And I stood on the concrete, breathing air that smelled of earth, watching the lifters climb upward. They rose heavily, straining, laden with our grain, and went into the pale sky until they became dots, then nothing. Then I lifted my head and looked higher still, where beyond the atmospheric haze the orbital transports hung, enormous as cities, full of holds, waiting for grain. They were so far away they looked like stars. But they were not true stars. The true stars were farther still. Out there were other worlds, other people, other wars. Out there someone was opening a ration right now and chewing bread, not knowing that the bread smelled of blood, oil, and grain dust. Not knowing that behind every kernel were someone's hands, someone's back, someone's life. Bram touched my shoulder. "Come on," he said, "loading is ending." Mordain said refueling, blessing of the machine spirit, inspection. I nodded, put the medal in my pocket, and turned to Gideon, to that mass of rusted iron, to that coffin on tracks, to that home, prison, workplace. Gideon waited. Its forward threshers, cleaned, greased, ready, shone in the sun, the open mouth of a beast waiting for the next field. I walked toward it, and every step was heavier than the last, because I knew that in a couple of days the floor would tremble, the horn would strike, and all of it would begin again. One of the port workers passing by glanced at me, a quick glance sliding over me as over furniture. He saw my skin, yellow from dust, cracked at the joints, saw my boots wrapped in wire, saw my overall patched, filthy, smelling of oil and sweat, and turned away, not from disgust, from indifference. To him, we were part of the machine, Gideon components that had stepped out to breathe and would now return to their places. And he was right. We would return, we always return. New season, new field, old bones. I reached the hatch. Before going in, I turned and looked toward the field, toward the direction from which we had come. Somewhere there, beyond the horizon, beyond hundreds of kilometers of golden wheat, stood 4 metal boxes. I could not see them. No one could. The field had already swallowed them, closed around them like water around a drowned man. Vale said a tractor would be sent. I would have liked to believe it. 2 days after the detachment, Mara came to me during the lunch break. She sat beside me without a word and ate her porridge without raising her eyes. Then, still not looking at me, she said quietly, "My brother was in Module 3 with his family." I stopped chewing. Mara fell silent. The spoon in her 3-fingered hand trembled. "The tractor will come," I said. She looked at me, nothing in her eyes, emptiness. The same emptiness people have when they have accepted the worst but have not yet admitted it to themselves. "Their condenser is broken," she said, "all of 3. I know. I fixed it myself last season. It held on by a prayer and a piece of wire. Water will last 6 days, maybe 7 if they save it." "The tractor will come," I repeated. Why did I say it? I did not believe it. She did not believe it. We both knew how the Imperium works. A tractor is a request. A request is a report. A report is a signature. A signature is another report. Each stage days, weeks. A tractor costs money, fuel, working hands. 400 people in a field are a problem easier to lose in paperwork than to solve. Mara finished her porridge, rose, and went to the exit. I sat over my empty bowl and stared at the table. Nearby, someone was telling a story about a rat that had crawled into the ventilation of the officer block and gnawed someone's ration. The workers laughed at once. Ordinary mess hall humor. And I thought of all those people, families now in a metal box in the middle of a golden field, waiting for rescue no one would ever send. "The tractor will come," Vale said. Vale said it. That evening Bram did not sleep. He lay on his bunk, arms behind his head, staring at the low, clouded, stained ceiling he could touch with his hand. "I cut the cables," he said into the dark. "All 6 of us cut them in 2 hours. 16 cables, 1 cut and gone." Do you know what I thought while cutting? I thought, what if I had been on the other side? What if I was in the module? What if I was pounding on the bulkhead while someone outside cut the cables? What would I feel? "Do not think about it," I said. "I would feel what they felt. Nothing, because we can do nothing, not us from here, not them from there. The machine decides, not us." He turned onto his side. "The machine, Gideon, the Imperium, what difference? All machine and we are all inside it, some closer to the engine, some closer to the tracks, some get ground up, some get detached, but there is nowhere to get out. Outside only the field." He fell silent. A minute later he snored with the same whistle as every night. I lay listening to the silence and thinking that Bram was right. Outside only the field. Golden, endless, indifferent. A field that does not care whether we exist. A week later Gideon passed an old module. Not ours. Someone else's from another harvester. It stood by the root, crooked, half drowned in wheat. Doors open, inside empty. On the wall, scratched with something sharp, there was one word. I could not read it. The camera was too far, the screen too murky. But Bram, whose eyes were better than mine, said the word was waited. Just waited. No exclamation mark, no name, no date, one word like a last breath. I stepped inside. The hatch closed. Darkness, heat, sharp choking smells, but so familiar and so dear. Home, sweet home. Bram followed me in silence, Mara after him. The whole crew, one after another through the narrow corridor leading to the living bays. In the bay I sat on my bunk, took the metal from my pocket and turned it in my fingers. Thin stamped tin. Aquila a little crooked, wings uneven. The inscription on the back was tiny, barely readable, for shock labor in glory of the emperor and the tithe. Bram looked at me. "What will you do with it?" "I do not know." "I will throw mine away," he said. But he did not. I saw him put it into his breast pocket close to the heart, maybe from superstition, maybe from anger, maybe because it was the only thing he had received for a whole season, the only proof that he existed, that his work was needed by someone, that he was not merely a labor unit with a stable number, but a man to whom someone, even the soulless machine of the administratum, had said, "You did it." I put the metal away, took Noah's bone comb from under the mattress, and laid it beside the metal. My whole collection, everything left from that season. Agnes came in before lights out, bringing ointment for my tooth, thick, stinking, the color of rusty water. "Rub it on the gums," she said. "Morning will be easier." "Thank you." She looked at me for a long time, tired. "How many did we lose this season?" she asked, though she knew the answer better than I did. 14. 14, she repeated, "and they will give us 2 new ones, maybe 3, then forward again." Do you know how many seasons I have counted? 47. 47 seasons on Gideon. I came as a girl younger than your Elliot. I have seen them replace the reactor 3 times, the tracks twice, the threshers 4 times. People do not need replacing. They come by themselves. Every season new faces, new names, new crew numbers, and every season old graves, or not even graves, just oil stains on the tracks. She left. I rubbed the ointment onto my gums. It did not help much, but the taste of the medicine covered the taste of blood, and that was something. The floor trembled. Gideon woke. The engines hummed, first quietly, then louder, than the familiar belly roar that makes the chest vibrate. The horn struck, the first rising horn, though we had not yet lain down. Somewhere in the engine rooms, Mordain had finished the blessing of the machine spirit and the hurried inspection. Refueling complete. New route loaded. New season, new field. New bearings that would scream. New names that would become crew numbers. New people who would lie in the tracks, boil in Kappa 7, remain in metal boxes in the middle of the field. The floor trembles. The floor always trembles. And I tremble with it to the very end.